So you've been working in your ops class student number tenant, the rec engine namespace, and then the source data topic. And we want to move that data now using Geo-Replication into another cluster. That other cluster we're going to move it to is a Pulsar cluster that's part of StreamNative hosted. So it's a fully hosted option by StreamNative. And I've given you the oauth 2 key that has tenant admin privileges on one particular tenant in that cluster. It happens to be the cluster that's named after your student. I'm going to, before we do anything to our cluster, base64 encode that oauth 2 file. And to do that, I already have moved the file into my downloads folder here. You can move it wherever you want. I've also provided you with the base64 encoded version of it already in case you have any issues encoding it. And to base64 encode, I'll do base64-i, and the file is oqmcug ops class student 4 for me .json. And this is the base64 encoded version of that file. I'm just going to copy that for now, and I'm going to use it a little bit later in the course, or a little bit later in this exercise. Now that we have that base64 encoded version of that file, I'm going to go into kubectl, into the tool set, and we're going to start using some commands with pulsar-admin to configure our cluster for Geo-Replication. And we're going to start by doing clusters list. And that's a pulsar-admin command that we're going to use here inside of the bin folder. And to start, the cluster should only know about itself. And that currently is called Private Cloud. We're going to add an entry to that, and we're going to call that entry training. Now, after this video, there's a whole description of the command pulsars create or clusters create, where we need the broker URL and the admin endpoint, as well as some auth parameters. And then if you go a little bit further down in the content after this video, there's another version of the clusters create command where everything is filled in except the base64 encoded file. So I'm going to be copying that version and adding in the base64 encoded version of my file, which you need to edit for your command as well. And then I'm going to paste it here into terminal. So to add an entry, here's the command I'm going to be using, where it has the correct broker URL and admin endpoint for our training cluster, as well as the correct audience and issuer URL. I have the base64 encoded version of that oauth 2 key that's going to allow me into one particular tenant. So mine's going to let me into my tenant. Yours is going to let you into your particular tenant inside of that hosted cluster. And then the entry here we're going to call training locally in our clusters list. So then we're going to reference it as training throughout our other commands. To make sure that this command has actually gone through, we're going to run clusters list again. So again, that was a pulsar-admin command, clusters list, and we now should see an entry called training. Now that entry called training is not accessible by any tenants yet. Basically, only the cluster admin can see that that exists. Any tenant admin or any tenants within your private cloud cluster still can't access that. So we can turn on the ability to use that training cluster reference and its credential on a tenant by tenant basis. So we're going to turn it on for the tenant that you've been using in your private cloud cluster, which happens to be the ops class student number. So the command here to update the tenant to have access to that training reference is here. This is a tenants update, and then the student number or the tenant, and then you're using the allowed clusters flag. I would always leave your local cluster first in this list. I would do that for all the commands. And then now after executing this, our tenant will have access to that training credential. We haven't actually turned on Geo-Replication at this point. Next, we're going to actually turn on Geo-Replication at the namespace level. And at that point, Geo-Rep should be activated. The command to turn it on at the namespace level is pulsar-admin namespaces set clusters. You put the tenant and namespace, and then you use the clusters flag, and again, use private cloud first, and then we're going to turn it on for training. So now when you publish any messages to any topic inside of the rec engine namespace in this tenant, it should automatically try and geo-replicate it. So we're using the source data topic. Before I do anything else, let me go ahead and look at the topic stats for the source data topic. That again is with pulsar-admin. We use the topics partition stats because this is a partition topic with one partition and then the full tenant namespace and topic. We should receive the partition stats back. And at this point, we should see replication and we should see that training is available. It currently says connected is false, which is not a good sign. Normally we would want to see it connected to true, but we haven't actually tried publishing anything yet to this. Let's try creating some messages inside of this topic, and then we'll come back to the stats and see if there's any backlog and see if connected changed to true. We're going to be using Pulsar perf to produce some messages. I'm going to produce 1,000 messages a second. And again, we're going to use our traditional command produce, disable batching. I don't need to let this run for very long. I just need a few messages to go through. So if I just confirm that we've been able to publish some messages locally, then I'll go ahead and stop it. So here I've got some messages. It produced about 8,000, and then wait another 10 seconds till the next iteration of this comes up. It should say around 18,000. So there we go. We should be good. And then we'll check the topic stats again. Checking topic stats again with partitioned stats. Let's check and see how our replication looks like for this topic. So it now says that it's connected and replication backlog is 0, and we have some message rate out. If at this point in the activity you're having any issues with this and it still says connected false and there's a replication backlog, this is a great time to contact training if you, because you'll probably need access to both servers to be able to do troubleshooting. At this point, I would help out with troubleshooting your replication and get back to you so you can move on to the next activity. And that we'll take that as a learning experience to figure out what exactly didn't work in the workflow. It could also be something I had set up on the destination side. To give you an idea what this looks like on the destination side, here's a StreamNative hosted Pulsar cluster. I'm going to select the tenant ops class student 4, and the namespace rec engine is the only namespace in there, so that gets auto-selected. And I'll go over to topics, so you can see that there is a source data topic with one partition, so this matches the name of the tenant, the namespace, and the topic, and the number of partitions. And you can see there's some storage size. Over here, we can see that there's storage size. In this example, haven't created a subscription, so this data is actually eligible for deletion. For your example, I will have already created the subscription so that if you email me, I can come in hours later, and the data would still be there to show me that you correctly had set up geo-replication. So I'm going to set up a new subscription here, my sub, and then at this point, it actually picked up the backlog here, and all the data would now be saved until this would be consumed. So this is just like any other topic over on this server. It's just the data happens to be coming through the replicator. And then just to show you what it looks like on the destination side for geo-replication, if I go over to the stats tab, the topic stats, this is the same as the pulsar-admin command. So it's exactly the same information, just on the destination, and we have it in the UI. If I scroll down, you'll see that there is no replication on the destination side. Replication, it would be on the source side if there was a replicator. And this is the exact field that we were looking at when we had looked inside of terminal. However, on the destination side, you will see a publisher. So here's the publisher, and it shows that it's coming from the private cloud side to the training cluster. So it has named that as the producer name.